Hello again, my friends. We have been working on a scratch build for a sister rig to Auriel, a mod that I did for a friend several years back now. In the last video, I left you with a cliffhanger as I need to drop what I was doing and get out of town. If you haven't watched that video, I really recommend that you do by clicking the link here. It has a bunch of modding tips in it, but at the very least, maybe it's just interesting. Now that you're caught up, let's continue. Some of my parts need repainting, or shall I say, needed painting. But I also noticed that I need to add a couple more features to my motherboard tray. After some quick sanding, I marked my part and drilled out the holes to prepare for tapping. After scrubbing the parts clean and leaving them out to dry, it was time for round 2 of painting. I absolutely should have purchased a new can, but I was cheap and wanted to use what was left up. But as a consequence, I had to fight the can the whole way. After finally getting the result from the paint that I wanted, or so I thought, I went back to polishing the frame. My son noticed me spending the next day and a half doing all this hand polishing and wanted to get involved. Now, I'm super grateful for his work and touch that he offered to help, but he did find out that just because Dad was doing it doesn't mean it was fun. And with that, my Tom Sawyering was over almost as soon as it began. By nightfall, I was pretty worn out. So when morning rolled around, I was tired of polishing. So I decided to take a break and assemble the mod so I could figure out the power supply situation. I had everything temporarily hooked up for testing, but there were 2 critical components of the system missing. Memory and, memory. I have some great friends at Patriot Memory who have been very generous with me in the past, and even given me design work over the years. They happily sent me some product that they thought would be good for this budget build. A 120GB Scorch M.2 SATA SSD, and 8GB of dual-channel Viper DDR4. The RAM in particular hits the nail on the head for fitting into the color and textures of the other hardware. It was also a treat for me, as this is one of the designs that I contributed to a few years back. It's cool to finally see it make it into production. Rumor has it that it'll also be getting some RGB love this summer. To power the system, I'm using a beta modded version of the HDPlex 300 AC/DC and a beta version of the Compact Dynamo 360, which is a DC-DC power supply and a merger unit. These 2 units combine and power different parts of the system, which cuts down on wires and makes them tuck away quite nicely. Now, I wasn't quite sure on the wiring yet, and I went with my gut instinct based on similar units. And my instinct was wrong. Go figure. I called up Craig from Compact, and he emailed me the most beautiful manual I have ever seen for a power supply in my life, which goes to show you should always read the manual. With clear pictures of the pinouts and everything corrected and repinned, the system finally booted, thankfully with no damage because of MSI's great power gates. Sunday rolled around, and as much as I might like to work, I refused to do so. So I rest in the work that's already accomplished with my family. When Monday hit, I realized how unhappy I was with some of my work. I was rushing to get the project done, and I was compromising when things didn't turn out perfect. I really wasn't liking the texture of the paint, and there was way too much uniformity in the tones and textures of the mod. I decided that I wasn't gonna let this slide. First up in correcting my mistakes is to repaint the side brace. Again, or yet again. I found that this paint really needs to be shaken up quite a bit for it to work, much more than I actually did. Turns out they really mean it when they say shake it for a minute. I also would have benefited from a new can, but I did end up making it work for me. Let this be a lesson to all you do-it-yourself guys and gals out there. Always read the instructions. I know, right? Although I really didn't want to put forth the effort, I felt compelled to give the motherboard tray a polished and burnished look, which involves stripping my paint and primer. This was easier said than done, as I prepared the parts properly already with a zinc phosphate etch and a good etching primer, half a can of stripper, and more applications than I can remember later. The metal was mostly bare. I used a flap wheel to get the stragglers off before moving on to other tools to give a nice, clean, and flat surface for polishing. Polishing took literally all day. And that night, I decided to go the extra mile on the stand component and do some more polishing. The next day, I did something kind of crazy. I decided the fully polished look wasn't quite right. So using WD-40 and a Scotch-Brite pad, I burnished the parts, creating a fine brush mark on them. My goal was a brush finish that was still pretty reflective. And this was the look that I wanted. And I was finally ready for the final assembly. Home stretch for the build is making a home for the power supplies and wiring them all up. The first step was to take some measurements. Measure twice, print once. Well, in my case, it's more like measure 4 times, print twice, but the ratio ends up working out the same. With my measurements in order, I began to work on designing the bracket that would fit in the smoked acrylic arm that was used to hold a radiator on the original Auriel. I realized the irony that I designed a PC on a Mac. It was my dad's iMac that he generously let me steal. Give me a break, I like using Final Cut Pro. Let's move on. With my bracket designed, it was time for me to fire up my secret weapon, the $13,000 Markforged Mark II. Now before you get any ideas, this printer is owned by Compact Design, and for the time being I run it for them here in the USA. This printer is eye-wateringly expensive because it prints parts with dual extruders. One extrudes a chopped carbon fiber and nylon mix called onyx, the other lays down a pure carbon fiber strand, although other composites like Kevlar can also be used. The result is a part that is not only ridiculously strong, but incredibly stiff. My bracket has to support a fair amount of weight with relatively thin features, but it still feels super solid. Contact Compact Design in the description below if you would like a part printed on his printer. So yes, the print turned out fantastic and fit perfectly. To rigidly attach the unit to the bracket, I used a soldering iron to insert brass threaded studs into the onyx. With the AC-DC converter mounted, I threw the wires together for a quick test fit. The bracket mounted perfectly using more stainless steel because you can never have enough expensive stainless steel. With the fit confirmed, the wiring and sleeving process went underway. Details matter, or at least it was starting to at this point. So I thought, why not spend another hour or so polishing the cover plate for the AC-DC converter? So I did. The system was feeling nearly complete after figuring out the best possible positioning for the DC distributor merger unit and mounting the AC-DC unit. Unfortunately, I did not measure perfectly and the motherboard was not gonna fit with the power supply in place. I was able to notch the AC receptor just a bit, but it was obvious that more drastic measures were gonna need to be taken. Rather than spend another 9 hours printing an expensive part, I decided to unsolder the interfering headers for the parallel port on the motherboard. After that, it fit perfectly. The wiring was almost done. I just need to strip and recrimp a few more wires, test run a few more, little more sleeving, and finally I was done. And no magic blue smoke this time. Okay, well, I was sort of done because risers kind of count as wiring. But for this, I had another secret weapon, my friend Willer Chin from Lee Heat. Lee Heat is an NFC partner and makes products for my industrial lineup from time to time. I sent him an email asking if he'd be willing to sponsor one of his high-speed, low-latency risers for the mod, and I knew he would say yes, but the catch was I needed to be a custom length, and I needed it fast. Like, really fast. Mr. Chin is a rock star though, and he sent me this incredible piece just in time. He also sent me some new procs to show you guys. 2 Sli Bridge Cables. These look amazing, and they allow you to move your graphics card using risers and stick 2 on top of each other. Of course, I don't really do that a whole lot because I mostly deal with mini ITX systems, but never say never. Now for the finishing touches. I've been saving this brushed aluminum I/O covered trim plate thingy from an EVGA X99 motherboard for years. With a little goo gone, the graphics came right off, and boy does this part make a big difference in the looks department. The fans I found for this build are also super important because they match the otherwise, shall we say, weird heatsink shroud on the 580. But they really tie the whole build together and make it look good. They got my special treatment next, and with the heat gun, I removed the hub stickers. The crowning jewel was one of my NFC premium on-off switches that I manufactured for my store. I needed a place to mount it though, but I quickly came up with an idea, and this is the beauty of having access to a 3D printer. Even if it's a cheap one, you can go from idea to part in record time. You know, I'm actually happy with my work here. I'm not happy with how long it took or how many attempts I made or how much paint I used up, but I'm happy that I stuck with it and persevered and actually kept working on it even when it didn't turn out perfect the first time. I'm glad I didn't settle when things didn't go my way. It's fun seeing what an air-cooled version of Auriel looks like, and what makes this version unique is the power supply, which opens up and displays much more of that beautiful hardwood. The cross-flow design of the mod and tall motherboard risers means that the profile is in the dead zone of the fan hubs, but the high pressure flow hits the heat sinks of the components perfectly. And the backside is also cooled, where one of the power supplies is stuffed. Now I know I told you guys last video that I was going to do some benchmarks and show you the system running, but truth be told, I've already made a video dedicated to this GPU and exact CPU, and you can watch it here. This video is more about the modding process. As for the final cost of the project, here's what it cost to make the chassis. And keep in mind, this wasn't for my labor. And here's the cost for the hardware used. Guys, let's be honest here for a second. The hardware in this build, not super exciting. But what is cool about it is that it's a great price and does give you great gaming performance. But more importantly, it varies something that I think is really important. Going out there, despite whatever you spent on your hardware, and making a really beautiful chassis for it. As you can tell, I'm really passionate about modding, but also sharing that passion with others. I know that I have a lot of tools now and bigger budgets and a camera and everything, but truth be told, I started when I was 16 years old, using junk out of trash bins and modding whatever computer I could get my hands on. I built my girlfriend a computer out of Home Depot refuse once, and at a sleepover I built one of my friends a computer out of a Little Debbie's box. It's really not about the money that you have. You can take whatever computer that you have now and you can put your passion, you can put your pride, you can put your labor into it, and you can make something that you're proud of. Show off your rig, no matter what the specs are. It's time to wrap this adventure up. As always, thank you Patreon supporters for keeping this channel video ad-free and for encouraging me to keep making videos like this. I really appreciate your kind words and your dollars. It's awesome. Thank you. I also want to thank AMD for sending me the AMD Combat Crate, which gave me an excuse to build this second Auriel. I want to thank Leheat for making me that custom riser and getting it to me super duper fast. And thank you Patriot Memory for sending me the RAM and the SSD so I could finish this build. I really appreciate you guys. If you'd like to thank these companies for supporting this channel by sending me cool stuff, check out the links to their products in the description below. Now, a final note. In honor of this past Memorial Day weekend, I'm trying to raise money for wounded warriors and homes for our troops. To do this, I'm auctioning off a one-of-a-kind S4 Mini Classic. This Mini is coated in mil-spec tan 686A chemical agent-resistant coating, or CARC for short, in the same facility that Keesler Air Force Base uses to coat their equipment. It's bundled with the awesome Games Assault stand, which you can take a look at by watching this video here. Along with that one-of-a-kind Mini, I'm selling the chassis that I actually crafted for this very video. I'm selling that to raise money for me in support of this channel. Okay, enough hustling, on to my next project. I really appreciate you guys watching. Peace.